Just to say that I'm not actually sponsored by Monster Energy, but to those other energy companies out there, I do drink a lot of energy drinks, so I'm not married to Monster Energy, so if you want to offer me a sponsorship deal, great opportunity. But anyway, Patrick Christys, I haven't done a video on him yet, but I've got him here declaring that we definitely need to talk about trans people in sport, because this is not a subject that's been like barreled into the ground, has it? So let's see what Patrick Christys has to say about trans people in sport.
Yes, I think we need to have a chat about trans people in sport. Now, of course, I witnessed something I didn't think I'd ever see, and something I never wanted to see. Someone who was born a man beating up a woman before choking her out during a professional televised MMA fight. Now, the optics of that, a former US Special Forces fighter punching a woman in the face before wrapping his arm around her neck and cutting off the blood supply to her brain until she had to tap out, are pretty grim. Alana McLaughlin is the transgender fighter's name.
So I can't let that slide for a start. So obviously we know what Patrick Christys' point is going to be. He's already shown his hand when he misgendered this MMA fighter, Alana. Forgot her name before this, so thanks for the reminder, Patrick. But yeah, you can you see the hyperbole and the emotive language behind what he's saying? He is relying on his audience being uneducated on what MMA is in this regard, because it helps his agenda to present what's happened here. This basically a trans MMA fighter competed in a MMA fight with a cis MMA fighter, and he needs you to think that it's literally a man beating up a woman. He just needs you to think that. Nothing about it being a sport in there, that you can't think of it like that. You need to think of this as common assault only. That's the only way he needs you to see it, for him like then painting it as like a shocking thing. But like the other statements, one person beating up another person in an MMA fight, describing what a choke is, like the way he describes that makes it sound like an actual assault, like something someone would do in like a barbaric display of violence. But it's a chokehold. It's very common. You do it in not just MMA, but like jiu-jitsu, judo. Like it's very common in martial arts. Like once again, I'm not going to say he doesn't know what MMA is, because he probably does. He just needs you to think of it in a certain way. But he's relying on you not knowing what MMA is. Put it that way. He needs you to like be clueless that is a very common technique, and it's not shocking at all to win by a chokehold.
They've been doing mixed martial arts now for about a year, and Celine Prevost, the woman who was battered on the canvas, has been fighting professionally for about a decade.
Battered on the canvas.
She was much more skilled, but
happened all the time, by the way. He wouldn't be saying this about John Jones walking into MMA and dominating, despite the lack of experience, beating 10-year veterans. He wouldn't say this about Vita Belfort showing up with very little experience when he first started and destroying people who've been doing it for years, and like absolutely destroying them, beasting them, because he's Vita fucking Belfort doing that. He wouldn't be saying it about them, because in his head, they are men fighting men. So that's a separate issue than two women having a fight, I guess. But yeah, once again, the hyperbolic emotive statement he's making, I really see through, and I'm hoping everyone can see it.
But clearly, she just couldn't deal with the overwhelming power of the trained killer who served in Afghanistan in 2007 as part.
So he's not just being misleading here, he's outright wrong about this. I've seen this a lot. So when people started posting about this on Twitter, it was always presented as this man came into an MMA cage and absolutely dominated, beat her up in minutes. This MMA fight they're talking about went into the second round, and there's pictures of the trans fighter, Alana, afterwards, face all cut up. They clearly took a battering. And also, if you actually watch the fight, anyone who has watched MMA before and has the ability to actually analyse it will tell you her opponent, Selena, I think her name was winning that fight. Like, that's a very uncontroversial statement. Go watch it. Go watch it. Forget that it's a trans person for a second. I know that's hard for some of you to like not see the trans person there and not make that your focal point. But just watch it, like in your head, like it's just an MMA fight. Don't care about the gender or even the sex of the people. Just watch it as an MMA fight. The non-trans athlete is winning that fight. Like, it's obvious. What happens is something that always happens in MMA and is very common. Once again, he's relying on people not knowing this. Sometimes you win the fight and then you get hit by a good shot, or you get caught in a submission and you lose. It just fucking happens. Deal with it. So the face of the trans athlete, in this case, demonstrate that she didn't dominate. She just didn't. She took a battering herself. Like, it's a ridiculous, like I say, a really hyperbolic statement to present this like a domination.
Part of an elite 12-man team, where it must be said they did genuinely cover themselves in glory according to reports. I have no issue whatsoever with people transitioning into a different gender. I genuinely wouldn't mind if my child wanted to transition themselves, as long as they weren't rushing into it.
I wouldn't mind if my little girl transitioned, but I would continue to go onto TV and tell her that she can't actually do stuff she wants to do because she lost that right as a human because she messed with her biology, or whatever stupid argument he's trying to make here.
And that they were absolutely certain that it was the right thing for them. But I would have an issue with my hypothetical daughter deciding that she wanted to learn self-defence, becoming quite good at it, and then ending up in a boxing ring with someone who was born a man, who then broke every bone in her face.
But presumably, if she got in the ring with a cis woman who proceeded to beat the fuck out of her and break every bone in her face, he'd be fine with that. That'd be no bother. It's just the fact that it's a trans athlete doing it. Fucking stupid. He wouldn't say this about, say, Ronda Rousey coming into a sport. Ronda Rousey, judo Olympian, gold medalist, came in women's MMA at a time where it was very unevolved, and really there weren't many women's MMA fighters at the time who had anything for her. So what Ronda Rousey was doing with very little MMA experience was coming in, taking people down with ease, and very quickly, putting them into an arm bar with ease, and in some cases, snapping their arms, like actually snapping their arms in an arm bar. It was such a gulf in skill that she did it so fast. Like, that, in theory, should be more concerning for you if you're outrage pardoning it like Patrick is, than a competitive MMA fight that just happened to be won by a trans athlete. It's a silly statement.
And that's my point. When female fighters go into the fight game, did they at any point think that they would end up fighting a former Special Forces war veteran who is built like a tank? No.
For one thing to point out is, yes, that the MMA fighter was perfectly fine with this fight taking place, by the way. There was no hesitation on her part. But also, what he's saying here is demonstrably untrue as well, because a lot of transphobes on Twitter have done this when this came to light, and what they were doing was taking, and this was their mistake, by the way, rhetorically, they were taking the before picture of Alana when she was male and was in the army, and let's be honest, then she was a beast. She was built like a brick shit house, huge. But then they compared it to like the now pictures. If you look now, a lot of them have deleted it or they've gone down to the bottom of the page, and the most prominent ones just show what she used to look like. And that's because when you compare the before and after pictures, so pre-transition and after transition, it becomes very clear that this talking point's bollocks. She is no longer built like a brick shit house. She's a great athlete, no doubt, and probably could kick my ass naturally. But if you, I'll put the pictures up on screen actually. But compare the before and afters. Not only has she lost a shit ton of muscle mass, she's visibly got a different frame. Because, funnily enough, when you go through gender reassignment therapy and they alter your hormones, funnily enough, that has an actual effect on your body. So this idea of like the South Park thing of like literally macho man showing up and going, I'm a woman actually, I'm competing with the women, it's bollocks. It's absolute bollocks. Like, I don't know why they're still trying to get away with it. We know it's not true anymore. But once again, they're relying on you not knowing that.
No, I don't think they did, because it's a relatively new development. So much is being made of women's football at the moment as well. Huge investment, huge advertising, huge profiling. The game has never been more popular among girls or played at a higher quality. When your daughter decides that she wants to play up front, and she's great at it, and she slaves away and gets herself a trial at somewhere like Manchester United, and then I turn up, and I'm twice the size of her, bigger, stronger, quicker. I'm used to playing the male side of the game, and I score a hat-trick, and then I get picked for the team. Where's the fairness there?
So the lack of fairness there is that you're a fully grown man playing against little girls, in your own example. Actually, I don't actually believe you could beat people having trials in Manchester United, even if they are little girls. I don't think you could beat them in a football match. Just personally, just looking at you, Patrick, I'll be honest. But also, you defeated your own argument, kind of, because you just said, I'm used to the male game of football. You said earlier that Alana had no experience in MMA. So which is it? What's the concerning thing? Someone with experience in the male side of it, but transitioning to the female side. Do you have a problem with that? Or do you just have a problem with men in general competing with women? And even so, are you just in the constantly wrong worldview that was a man equals always a man? It's daft. And also, actually, this, while we're on it, this talking point of it being unfair if a male transitions to a female and then competes because of a disproportionate outcome is also bollocks. It's the most popular thing. Oh, a man goes over to a women's sport and does really well. How unfair is that? You'd think, for how mainstream that viewpoint seems to be, there'd actually be evidence of this. But there isn't. Not the way they present it. The way they present it would be every single sport done by women is just suddenly dominated by transitioning athletes. And that's not the case. Weird. So there's a very famous example of this in America. Of this hugely high potential blue chip prospect in track and field. She was a high school athlete. I think it was a running event, and she went to some qualifier. It was probably nationals. I don't think it was as far as Olympic, but there was definitely talk that she could be eventually in the Olympic team at track and field. But this star athlete went to these trials and ran her race, and she didn't qualify because she was running against two trans athletes who beat her. And then, she sued. She sued because she's saying I'm usually the best, and I'm suddenly not the best because I ran against two men, she would present it as. Sounds bad, doesn't it? Until you look into it and you find out because it was qualifiers, the top 6 would qualify. She did run against 2 trans athletes, and those trans athletes became 5th and 6th, and she finished 7th. So she didn't qualify, but also those 2 trans athletes didn't dominate. In fact, there were 4 other cis athletes who beat them and the woman who sued. So what's the moral of the story? She was 7th best in that field. That's why she didn't qualify. That's what she's angry about. She's 7th best. So there's this idea that men transition and then dominate is bollocks, because they would have came 1st and 2nd, clearly. And if that was the case, so what that suggests is they were actually running at around the same level as her. There was no competitive advantages. They were just better than her, as were 4 other cisgendered athletes running in that race. And then there was the Olympic weightlifter, who everyone did a little panic wank over, and sort of went, it's a man, and competing with women, weightlifting, obviously he's going to do better than them. And then she didn't even qualify. Like, she failed her first lift on the Olympics. And so this idea that a man transitioned and now they're a woman competing with women at weightlifting, and she didn't do very well. Like, so in that case, clearly this idea that any man transitioning would dominate is a load of bollocks. It's mental that they're still holding on to this pearl clutching when it's bollocks. We can see it's bollocks, mate. Like, mental.
Where's the feminism in all of this? Because it's only going one way, isn't it?
Trans women are women. If you don't support trans rights, you're not a feminist.
It's only really men becoming women and entering female sport. Women threw themselves...
Not true. There's a trans male boxer who's actually on a winning streak and doing very well. Actually beating cis men in boxing. You can't really mention that though, can you? It doesn't work for your propaganda.
In front of horses to get the vote, for goodness sake. I very much doubt that their brighter vision of equality, including men fighting women in a brutal blood sport for money. Women are either going to get serious...
Remember, MMA equals brutal blood sport for money. We dealt with this in the fucking 90s. People still, like, pearl clutching over MMA is mental.
Or have their moments of sporting glory snatched away from them by someone who spent the first 20 years of their life as an athletic man. We're staring down the barrel of seeing an Olympic podium in the women's category of various events with 3 people stood on it who used to be men.
Demonstrably untrue because of the weightlifting. We've just demonstrated that.
How long is it before the MMA world champions or boxing world champions in the women's side of the draw all happen to have been born men? I'm all for equality, inclusivity and diversity, but I'm not for women being beaten both metaphorically and physically by people who were born male, and I'll make no excuses for that. There's no feminism there, there's no fairness there, and for want of a better phrase, I do think people need to grow a pair and stand up to this dangerous nonsense.
Wow. Grow a pair. Do you mean to do that? Anyway, what he's talking is bollocks. He's expecting you, his audience, to not know anything about MMA. I haven't even mentioned the fact that MMA is divided by weight category. So if we compare the tail of the tape between the trans athlete, the trans fighter, and her opponent, then you'll actually see they're about equal. I think the cis fighter actually had like a very big height and reach advantage. So MMA is divided by category, so you're literally never going to have a situation where a woman is fighting a trans athlete who's like twice their size. Like, he wants you to think it's silly, it's stupid, it's pathetic. He's pathetic. It's see-through. This could have been a video made in the 90s explaining why MMA is evil and barbaric. It's the usual conservative pearl clutching, and for and for a political affiliation that basically makes his personality call him the left snowflakes, by God, they're offended by everything. It's mental.